The film begins with a rich man named Hato, who is relaxing in a fancy house with his young wife. Suddenly, their dog starts barking nonstop, making them feel uneasy. At that time, Hato's wife, annoyed by the noise, tells the servant to take the dog outside. But when the servant does, she is suddenly attacked and killed by someone who was secretly targeting Hato. After killing the servant, the mysterious person, named Daniel, goes inside and also kills Hato and his wife. Daniel is a feared assassin in Europe, and Hato was his main target. To cover his tracks, Daniel sets Hato's house on fire and quickly leaves the scene. The scene then moves to a top school in Switzerland, where we meet Hato's only child, Ella. At this point, Ella has no idea that her father has been murdered. In another part of the story, a hitman named Lucas is hired to kill Ella. But before he does, Lucas decides to check on who Ella really is. That evening, a dormitory staff member was looking for Ella to tell her that Hato had passed away. However, Ella's roommate lied and said that Ella was still in the library, even though Ella was actually hiding behind the door. The dormitory staff asked her friend to tell her to come to him once she got back from the library. But Ella had other plans. She had arranged to meet her boyfriend at a nightclub that night. So, she quietly climbed out of the window to go on her date. Meanwhile, Lucas was already keeping an eye on Ella and followed her to the nightclub. At the club, Ella met her boyfriend, and they went inside to have some fun. Lucas kept watching her, waiting for the right moment to carry out his mission. But when he saw Ella's face up close, he was reminded of his own daughter, who looked a lot like her. Because of this, Lucas, who had originally planned to kill Ella, now felt the need to protect her. Soon, another hitman appeared, aiming to shoot Ella, but Lucas acted quickly and shot the hitman first. Then, a shootout ensued because it turned out that Ella was part of a deadly competition with a prize of $1 million. Fortunately, Lucas managed to get Ella and her boyfriend out of the club and into a car to escape. However, other assassins continued to chase them. At one point, Lucas caused one of the chasing cars to crash. He got out of the car to deal with the assassins, but while he was distracted, Ella and her boyfriend ran away. Not long after, Lucas found Ella and drove up to her. He told Ella that assassins were after her and that if she wanted to survive, she had to come with him right away. However, Ella's boyfriend didn't trust Lucas and tried to convince her not to go with him. After thinking it over, Ella finally decided to go with Lucas. As they were driving, Ella asked if everything happening was connected to her father. Lucas didn't say anything at first, staying silent. Ella then wondered why they couldn't just go to the police for help. Lucas finally replied, explaining that 80% of the authorities in the country were controlled by the people who wanted her dead. The next morning, still in the car, they decided to stop in a parking lot. Before they arrived, Lucas told Ella to duck down so the officers wouldn't see her. While hiding, Ella noticed that Lucas had a syringe, suggesting he was using illegal drugs. When they got to the parking lot, Lucas planned to switch their car with another one parked there. He explained that they needed to leave the country as soon as possible, using a border route that was only a few hours away. To avoid being spotted, Lucas told Ella to hide in the back seat. As they continued driving, Ella admitted that she really hated her new stepfather and stepmother. She knew that her father had been involved in illegal drug trafficking across Europe, which led to her biological mother's death. Now, Ella felt her own life was in danger because of her father's actions. She then asked Lucas if he was really an addict, and Lucas admitted that he was. Ella also wanted to know who he really was, but Lucas told her to stay quiet because the police were checking cars ahead of them. After they passed the police check safely, Lucas finally opened up. He shared that he used to be an army sergeant. He lost all his friends during a battle, which made him very depressed. This led to his addiction and caused problems in his personal life. The scene then shifts to England, where we meet a man named Richard. Richard is watching his son practice archery because he wants his son to grow up tough and ruthless. It was known that Richard was the one who hired hitmen, including Lucas, to kill Ella's family. This is because Ella's father, who was once Richard's business partner, planned to report all of his crimes to the FBI. Soon after, a corrupt FBI agent named Gina arrives. Turns out, Gina has been secretly working with Richard and comes to inform him that Hato and his young wife have been successfully killed. However, Gina also reports that one of the hitmen, Lucas, betrayed Richard by taking Ella away, and now no one knows where they are. Gina also mentions that before Hato died, he managed to steal all of Richard's money. This makes Richard furious, and he orders Gina to find and kill both Ella and Lucas and to recover the stolen money. After his meeting with Gina, Richard goes to a warehouse at the back of his property. There, he has a civilian put into a cage to train his vicious dog. The civilian is dressed in protective gear, but the dog still manages to attack and kill him, which makes Richard very pleased. Meanwhile, 2 hours later, Lucas and Ella arrive in France. They stop at an empty house that once belonged to Lucas's best friend, who died in battle. Inside, he decides to call Richard. When Richard answers, Lucas asks why Richard wants to kill Ella, considering it was her father who planned to expose Richard to the FBI. There, Richard coldly explains that killing Ella is a warning to his other business partners not to betray him. Richard then tries to convince Lucas to kill Ella, promising a big reward. But if Lucas refuses, Richard threatens to target his family, especially his daughter. Now, Lucas is torn between saving Ella or protecting his own family. After that, Lucas took Ella out of the car's trunk and brought her into the house. Once inside, Ella asked to use the bathroom, and while there, she noticed a cell phone lying around. Curious, she tried calling her father's number, but instead of her dad, Gina, the corrupt FBI agent, answered. Gina told Ella that Lucas was actually a hitman sent to kill her. Gina said that if Ella wanted to stay safe, she needed to send her current location right away. After sending the location, Ella came out of the bathroom and nervously asked Lucas if he really intended to kill her. Lucas admitted that he was supposed to, but he couldn't go through with it because she reminded him of his own daughter. Scared, Ella ran away, trying to escape. Not long after, Lucas chased after her in his car and tried to convince Ella that he wouldn't harm her. He explained that even though he was hired to kill her, he couldn't do it because she reminded him of his daughter. Lucas also broke the news that her father was dead, which shocked Ella. Even though Ella had always had a complicated relationship with her father, deep down, she still loved him. While Lucas and Ella were taking a break to eat and drink, they were suddenly shot at by 2 of Richard's men. They quickly tried to escape by running into the house. Soon after, Lucas ended up fighting one of the men, while Ella tried to sneak out through the back. However, when she got outside, another one of Richard's men was waiting for her with a gun. Just as Ella was about to be killed, Lucas appeared and saved her, urging her to run away with him. As they drove away, Lucas told Ella to take the wheel while he treated a gunshot wound on his thigh from earlier. But Ella, still shaken up, wasn't paying attention and crashed the car into a barrier. Because of this, they had to continue their journey on foot. Finally, Lucas and Ella made it to a train station, planning to leave the country. Shortly after, Lucas called his best friend to meet them at the next train stop. While they were waiting, a police officer approached Lucas, wanting to check his identity. Luckily, Lucas had prepared fake documents, so the officer didn't suspect anything and let them go. While on the train, Lucas's friend named Susan arrived. At that time, Lucas had asked her to meet him there because he needed help. And Susan, who is also an assassin and has been friends with him for a long time, was asked to treat his injuries. While she was treating Lucas, Susan told Ella to go to the next train carriage for a moment. As Ella waited, she started to remember moments from her past with her father, who was now gone. After finishing with Lucas, Susan went to talk to Ella. She warned Ella that Lucas was unpredictable and could be dangerous because of his addiction and changing mood. Susan suggested that if Ella wanted to stay safe, she should get off at the next train stop and run as far away as possible. After giving this advice, Susan returned to Lucas just as the train was about to stop. Susan tried to distract Lucas so he wouldn't go looking for Ella, even tempting him with some drugs. But Lucas realized that Susan was trying to trick him and forced her to tell him where Ella was. Susan finally confessed that Ella had just gotten off the train and admitted she had been paid by Richard's men to keep Lucas away from Ella. After knowing that, Lucas immediately rushed to find Ella. Meanwhile, outside the train, Ella was approached by Daniel, the man who had killed her father at the beginning of the story. Just as Daniel was about to capture Ella, Lucas appeared, and a gunfight broke out between Lucas and Daniel. During the chaos, Lucas managed to grab Ella and escape from Daniel's pursuit. Afterward, they decided to head to England by ship. During the journey, Ella asked Lucas if he would ever try to kill her. At that time, Lucas didn't want to answer and instead focused on teaching Ella how to use weapons. But when Ella kept pressing him with questions, Lucas pointed her gun at his own chest and told her that if she couldn't trust him, she could shoot him right then. In the end, Ella decided to trust Lucas. After arriving in England, Lucas took Ella to an old, empty house that he owned but hadn't visited in a long time. While they were there, she asked Lucas who was behind the plot to kill her family. Lucas explained that the person responsible was a man named Richard, who was an international criminal pretending to run an investment company. Curious to learn more, Ella used a computer in the house to find out about Richard. Then, she discovered his company's name and address, which happened to be in England. Soon after, Ella went to check on Lucas, who was struggling with withdrawal symptoms as he tried to overcome his addiction. She asked Lucas to take down Richard in exchange for double the reward, since she was now the sole heir to her father's wealth. But because Lucas was feeling so sick from withdrawal, he didn't respond and just ignored Ella. Determined to take matters into her own hands, Ella grabbed a gun and decided to go to Richard's office, which was nearby. Even though Lucas, who was barely conscious, told her not to go, Ella was so sure and chose to leave to confront Richard herself. Moments later, Ella arrived at Richard's office, determined to confront him. She approached the receptionist and asked her to call Richard, saying she wanted to turn herself in. Shortly after, Richard appeared, and Ella quickly pointed a gun at him. However, she hesitated and couldn't bring herself to pull the trigger. Instead, Ella panicked and ran out of the building. But as soon as she stepped outside, the city police were waiting for her, and she was arrested and taken to the police station. Meanwhile, Gina, the corrupt FBI agent, called Richard to inform him that all the money Ella's father had stolen was stored in a Swiss bank account under Ella's name. This meant that they needed Ella's consent to access the money. Realizing this, Richard told Gina to go to the police station and get Ella released immediately so they could take the money. That evening, Ella was released from the police station. At that time, Gina was already there, pretending that she was going to take Ella to the airport so she could safely return to America. But behind the scenes, Lucas, who had recovered from his withdrawal, was searching for Ella. There, Lucas spotted Richard's men on a security camera sneaking into the area, so he quickly took action and stopped them. Lucas initially tried to send a message to Richard through one of the men, asking him to leave Ella alone, but when the man resisted, Lucas had no choice but to eliminate him. At the same time, Susan suddenly appeared, pointing a gun at Lucas. But he tried to convince Susan to leave, reminding her that they were once friends. But Susan revealed that she had been hired to kill Lucas because Richard had put a high price on his head. In the end, Lucas had to act first and ended up killing her. Meanwhile, Gina took Ella to a warehouse, where Daniel was waiting to take care of Ella. At that moment, Richard contacted Lucas, taunting him by saying that he was now powerless and should disappear because Ella was in Richard's hands. A few hours later, Gina and Daniel took Ella to Richard's house. They planned to keep Ella locked up in Richard's basement until she revealed the details of her Swiss bank account. That same night, Richard was hosting a big party with some important officials. But while the party was going on, Lucas had already sneaked in. When Richard realized Lucas was there, he panicked and rushed to a room to grab a weapon. But Lucas was already there, pointing a gun at him. Knowing how skilled Lucas was, Richard begged him not to kill him and even offered to pay Lucas whatever he wanted. At that time, Lucas only wanted to know where Ella was. Shortly after, Richard told him that Ella was still alive and being held in the basement with Gina and Daniel. Lucas then forced Richard to lead him to the basement. When they arrived, Richard warned Gina and Daniel not to mess up. But at that moment, Richard's son suddenly arrived and shot an arrow at Lucas, starting a shootout. The sound of gunfire made all the guests at the party panic and rush outside. During the chaos, Lucas managed to kill Gina. Meanwhile, Ella tried to escape by running down a hallway, but Daniel caught up to her and shot her in the shoulder, making it hard for her to continue. Just when things seemed hopeless, Lucas arrived, and a fierce fight broke out between him and Daniel. At one point, Daniel had the upper hand and was about to defeat Lucas, but suddenly, Richard appeared and shot Daniel. Turns out, Richard had planned to kill both Lucas and Daniel all along. Richard then aimed to shoot Lucas, but before he could, Ella managed to shoot him first, saving Lucas. After all the chaos, Lucas quickly took Ella outside to get medical help for her injured shoulder. A few months later, Lucas got a call from Ella, who had returned to America. Ella was now living with her uncle's family and seemed really happy. She asked Lucas how he was doing, and he told her he was doing fine. Ella then shared that she had transferred $10 million to Lucas's account as a thank you gift. She also told him that if he ever needed anything, she she would be there to help. After this, Lucas felt brave enough to finally reunite with his wife and children. Now that he had overcome his drug addiction, his family was ready to welcome him back, especially since he had a lot of money in his account. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if you're going to mess with assassins, make sure you have a Swiss bank account and some serious dodgeball skills. Also, it's never too late to drop the bad habits and cash in on a happy ending.